Virus sniffing dogs. Questions arise over whether the dogs will be able to sniff out new variants. This comes as debate continues around vaccine passports. Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure package, is it worth it? Experts are warning the tax hikes cancels out the benefits. And Pennsylvania Representative Mike Kelly and GOP colleagues are seeking information about nursing home deaths from the virus. Kelly says they've sent repeated requests to 4 states, but they aren't getting any response. Tune into Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Are virus sniffing dogs the future? Some countries seem to think so. Italy and Thailand both have teams working on training dogs to do just that. A medical team in Rome is training dogs to sniff out the virus in people's sweat. The goal is to help with mass testing in the future. According to a lab director on the team, the first goal is to get the dogs to recognize organic compounds that embody the COVID-19 disease. They use samples taken from patients currently in care to train the dogs. And a university in Thailand is working on the same goal. They say the dogs have a high success rate. The leader of the project tells Reuters the dogs take only 1 to 2 seconds to detect the COVID-19 virus per one sample. Adding within 1 minute, they will manage to go through 60 samples. According to the researchers, 6 Labrador retrievers have been selected to take part in the 6-month pilot project, and so far they have an accuracy rate of 94.8%. Researchers say patients with COVID-19 will secrete a volatile organic compound through their perspiration or sweat, a scent that dogs can detect even if they don't show obvious symptoms. The goal is to send the dogs to help out at airports in the future. The researchers say the dogs will be much faster and more precise in detecting the virus than temperature checks. The question sparking now is if the dogs will be able to sniff out new variants. This comes on the heels of the vaccine passport controversy currently gripping the world. Some point out there are several kinds of COVID-19 vaccines from the US, China, Europe, and question what would happen if different countries didn't recognize the vaccine one did take. And others note vaccine passports could simply not work, with different strains of the virus coming out and different vaccines having different efficacy rates. While the Biden administration is not creating virus vaccine passports, it is working with private companies. Officials will work with the private sector on guidelines for the passport systems. Those systems can be used for people to show proof when they've been vaccinated. Now, one of the largest and oldest civil liberties groups issuing a strong statement against vaccine passports. The American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, wrote, "There is a difference between a standardized system for presenting proof of vaccination and a digital system for doing so." Adding, with more and more of our credentials being displayed through apps on our phones, from airline boarding passes to concert tickets to gym memberships, it strikes many people as an obvious and overdue step to create a similar digital credential for those occasions when a person has to prove that they've been vaccinated. New York was the first to roll out a vaccine passport program. They call it the Excelsior Pass. In New York, you have to either test negative or get vaccinated to go to wedding receptions and other venues. The ACLU notes using a digital system is problematic because numerous people don't own a smartphone, meaning they cannot display a vaccine passport document digitally or via an app. They also warn against creating a database that tracks people. They write, if some big company is getting notified anytime someone reads one of your credentials, that would let them track your movements and interests, the stores, concerts, and transportation venues you visit, and much more. In the absence of airtight legal protections for privacy, any such information could then be sold for commercial purposes or shared with law enforcement. Some people could become afraid of that. The ACLU continues by saying, fear of tracking could lead people to opt out of participation, resulting in further marginalization as they are denied access to certain public spaces. Worse, without privacy protection strong enough to create public confidence, it could even deter people from getting vaccinated in the first place. Some states, meanwhile, have introduced proposals to ban such vaccine passports. The Missouri State Senate on Wednesday took such actions. Text of the proposed bill states no entity in this state shall require documentation of an individual having received a vaccination against any disease in order for the individual to access transportation systems or services. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis calls vaccine passports unacceptable. He announced he'll take executive action against them. He says people shouldn't need to prove they've been vaccinated just to be able to participate in normal society. And Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene introduced a proposal to ban vaccine mandates, as well as so-called vaccine passports. The We Will Not Comply Act would ban documents that show who has been vaccinated or recently tested negative for the virus. According to a statement from her office, the proposal would prevent any business engaged in interstate commerce from discriminating against a person based on their COVID-19 vaccine status. It would cut off federal funding for a vaccine mandate. It would also prohibit the government from requiring a CCP virus vaccine to get a U.S. passport and prevent airline companies from denying someone from flying based on their COVID-19 vaccination status, as well as create the ability to sue if a person has been discriminated against on the basis of their vaccination status or mask compliance. Now, the odds of it passing aren't high. It is unlikely to make much headway in the Democrat-controlled House of Representatives. And if it is unlikely to pass. Now, let's turn from vaccine passports to nursing home scandals. 4 states are under scrutiny. Pennsylvania Representative Mike Kelly told the Epoch Times he has sent 4 states multiple requests for data on nursing home deaths and hasn't heard anything. He and a group of GOP colleagues are asking Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and California for the information. Critics say these states use similar approaches to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Cuomo required nursing homes in his state to take in residents infected with the virus. Critics say this caused many additional deaths. Cuomo is also accused of hiding the number of deaths caused by the virus in nursing homes. The FBI is investigating him. The other 4 states all have Democrat governors. Kelly says his state of Pennsylvania had almost identical policies to New York. He says the only problem is we can't look at the data. And because of that, he has real concerns that something is going on that should not be going on. Rachel Levine was Pennsylvania's Secretary of Health before she joined the Biden administration. She testified that there's a time lag between the time of deaths and when they get reported. A reporter with the local TV station 11 News says the missing data goes back to May. Kelly says that when data is too old, it becomes useless for steering policy. He questions if the officials involved wanted to put out a certain message, and it didn't matter if they had the facts to back it up. Now, let's turn to nationwide issues. President Biden held his first cabinet meeting on Thursday. Biden touched on his massive infrastructure package and named cabinet members who will spearhead the effort to get that bill passed through Congress. 5 cabinet members now appointed to lead Biden's efforts. Secretaries of Transportation, Housing, Energy, Labor, and Commerce. Republicans want to negotiate on infrastructure, but prefer to strip the package of its social welfare agenda and corporate tax hikes. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell saying let's do an infrastructure bill. Let's don't turn it into a massive effort to raise taxes on businesses and individuals. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo, meanwhile, says money shouldn't be a concern. Rather, what's important, she says, is getting ahead of global competitors. While lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have long pushed for America's crumbling infrastructure to be revitalized, they are still divided over Biden's proposed infrastructure package. Democrats say they want a bipartisan bill, but some say they should pass the bill without Republicans. They could use the budget process to get around the filibuster. That is how Democrats passed the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill without Republican votes. Senator Bernie Sanders says it is very hard to get Republican support. He says Democrats should pass the bill without Republicans again if they need to. Some Democrats say they won't do that with this bill. With an evenly split Senate, every Democrat would have to agree to cut Republicans out. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has signaled he is unlikely to support the infrastructure plan. He cites the massive tax hikes as a reason. He also echoed earlier remarks calling the package a Trojan horse of Democratic priorities, like tax hikes. He said on Twitter, the administration's infrastructure bill looks like another Trojan horse for far-left demands, rolling back right-to-work laws, imposing the biggest new tax hikes in a generation, killing jobs and slowing wage growth when workers need a fast recovery. McConnell noted that less than 6% of this massive proposal goes to roads and bridges. It would spend more money just on electric cars than on America's roads, bridges, ports, airports, and waterways combined. Out of the estimated $2 trillion, just $115 billion goes to repairing and rebuilding bridges, highways, and roads. McConnell says the tax hikes could damage the economy, hurting American jobs. He says he is not against infrastructure, which remains a united goal across the aisle. McConnell says our nation could use a serious targeted infrastructure plan. There would be bipartisan support for a smart proposal. Unfortunately, the latest liberal wish list the White House has decided to label infrastructure is a major missed opportunity by this administration. He adds, "My advice to the administration, if you want to do an infrastructure bill, let's do an infrastructure bill. Before the pandemic, we had the best economy in 50 years. We should not raise taxes under the guise of an infrastructure bill and send our economy in the wrong direction." McConnell isn't alone in that concern. President of the conservative-leaning think tank Tax Foundation, Scott Hodge, says in a report, the promise of Biden's infrastructure plan is that the economic benefits of government infrastructure spending outweigh the economic harm from an increase in corporate taxes. But he notes studies show otherwise. He goes on to say federal investment financed by debt or taxes could do more economic harm than good because federal borrowing and taxes crowd out private investment, suggesting federal investment should be financed through cutting spending in other discretionary programs so as not to harm the economy. He cites studies by the Congressional Budget Office show increasing taxes to finance federal investment would lead to lower economic output and personal consumption. They recommend expanding private investment rather than federal. The study notes a $100 million federal investment would increase GDP by $5 million, whereas the same private investment would boost GDP by $10 million. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, meanwhile, defended raising corporate tax hikes, saying that 91 of the Fortune 500 companies paid no federal taxes in 2018. She says that is not something that the American people believe is fair, that we believe is fair. And what we are talking about here is making adjustments to the tax code to make it more fair. The infrastructure plan imposes a 15% minimum tax on large corporations. That way, companies like Amazon can't avoid paying U.S. federal taxes. It also eliminates certain deductions and credit for the fossil fuel industry. Biden unveiled his infrastructure plan on Wednesday. He says at the core is to modernize transportation infrastructure. The White House earlier released a fact sheet detailing the first of a two-part plan that Biden wants to pass through Congress in the coming months. Biden is expected to lay out a separate plan later this month that addresses child and health care. That's called the American Family Plan. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and have a wonderful weekend.